to do a video following up on my previous post about replacing the front suspension fork on the Matex, and that's because there were some mentions of certain parts that some people might have trouble understanding, and generally it helps to do it visually. But what this video is actually about is an upgrade to the handlebars on the Matex. I've got here the original Matex front fork. It's a pretty heavy fork. It has no air. It's got a spring inside here, and it's got a sort of compression adjustment which should make the spring tighter and handle more weight. And you've got a lockout mechanism here which should basically stop the fork from moving, almost stop the fork from moving, so the spring isn't being used. The unfortunate problem with this fork is, of course, it doesn't support anyone who weighs above, let's say, 95 kilos or higher. And even if it just does, as soon as you go off-road and start going over bumps and through potholes and stuff, it's just going to show its weakness. It's going to compress right the way down to the bottom. You can't tighten it to the right point, and you're just going to get, basically a really bad suspension experience. Now, when you buy a new one of these forks, the steerer tube here, also called the stem by some people, is going to be longer, right? So that means if this is going to fit perfectly in your Matex frame, which goes from here to here, you're going to have to cut your steerer tube on your new fork to exactly the same length as this. So you're going to have to go in and measure distance from here to here, and then you're going to have to cut the fork off at that length using a hacksaw or a tube cutter or something like that, a pipe cutter. You can do that, that's perfectly fine. The problem occurs when you in future decide, for whatever reason, that you want to upgrade your handlebars to a BMX set of handlebars, because you're going to need a longer steerer tube for that. And when you've cut it, well, you've kind of backed yourself into a corner. There are ways around that. I haven't tried them myself, however, but you can get a stem extender, which is kind of like this. Let me see. This part, which you can screw on here. But the difference is, at the top here, it's got another stem sticking out. So you can kind of extend your steerer tube using one of those stem extenders. Personally, I haven't tried one. I can't recommend it because I haven't tried it, but they do exist. This is threaded. That's right, it's got a screw thread inside it. And here's the top cap that comes with Matex with the screw thread on it. And if you get a replacement fork, that's not going to have a thread inside. So you're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to get something called a star nut, which needs to be hammered down into here. It's a special kind of nut that will go one way but not the other. And then you get a screw and another different kind of top cap which goes into the star nut and basically replaces this. That's why you need to consider upgrading your fork and your handlebars at the same time. We're going to take a look at the BMX handlebars in a moment, and I'll show you all the parts that are relevant when thinking about how long should I keep my steerer tube if I'm going to replace the front handlebars with BMX handlebars. Would you, is the question. I mean, this is a pretty good idea. It's lightweight, it's foldable, and depending on where you store your bike or how aggressively you ride or how you need to transport your bike, the folding bars might actually be a really good idea to hold on to. The only reason I decided to upgrade was I've seen some horrible pictures of these welds breaking up here, which is not a good thing if you're riding, this thing just coming off in your hands. You don't want that, especially not with a sharp edge left over when you're sitting there with these things about to fall over. So that's just a safety hazard if you ask me. I'm not going to say that's a problem for everybody. It depends whether or not the thing was properly welded in a hurry at the factory, or whether you ride aggressively, or whether you're heavy, or whether you're in a terrible accident. Basically, I don't trust these. That's just my opinion. Another thing is these screws here. You see them at the top, coming out the bottom as well. These screws are too short when you get your Matex. They won't extend through the bottom like these do. They stop somewhere inside here. And the problem with them being too short is they are going to break, they're going to snap. They don't grip enough of the thread inside this hole. And sometimes they loosen up and start to move and actually wear the thread out because of the low quality. So definitely replace these with longer ones. Try and get ones that will stick out from the bottom a little bit. I believe the size is a T6 screw. M6, sorry, that's the one. M6 screws. But basically just take the old one out when you arrive at your hardware store, bring it with you and find a longer one. That's my advice, that's what I did. Okay, let's take a look at the actual replaced handlebars on my Mate X, and we'll talk about the parts that I used and why I used them, and why it sort of pertains to the length of the stereo tube on your new front fork. So what you're seeing here is my Mate X with the double crown fork, which I bought from eBike parts, and a KHE top loader and KHE BMX handlebars. I didn't cut the tube at all, and this is because I decided to use spacers to allow me to adjust the height of the handlebar. Switching around the order of the top loader here and the spacers, I can raise and lower the BMX handlebars as I see fit. Another thing is that the double crown fork here has this extra piece on top, which requires a little extra length on the stereo tube before you start adding your top loader. So I was pretty skeptical about doing any cuts on the stereo tube until I had all the pieces assembled, and decided that I wasn't going to do any cuts at all, that I could do it using the spacers. At the end of a typical BMX handlebar, you'll find it's a 22.2mm tube all the way along, which is great and perfectly fine for moving your hand grips, brakes, bell, pedal assist, remote control, and what have you, from the handlebars of your Mate X to your BMX handlebars. However, the BMX handlebars have these horizontal bars, which are not the same diameter as the handlebars on the Mate X. These are even slimmer than 22.2mm. I haven't quite measured them, but they're certainly a lot thinner than the 31.8mm, which is used for mounting the Mate X display to the center of the folding handlebars on the original Mate X handlebars. So you're going to have to get something called shims or reducers, which will allow you to increase the diameter of the tube, allowing the Mate X display something to clamp onto. Now, you will probably be able to find 22.2 to 31.8 millimeter shims or reducers. However, in order to get them to fit these horizontal bars, you're probably going to have to do some sort of sneaky hacks with maybe a thick layer of rubber. I don't know, cut up an old mouse mat or something into strips and sort of just, get it in there to make sure it's a nice snug fit. I decided to move my display down here, just above the top loader, and that did require me to extend the cable that goes from the pedal assist remote control to the display, because otherwise it was just going to be too short. But the thing about putting the display down here is it's a lot more securely placed. It's less exposed. The clamp that sort of attaches the display to the handlebars is not going to get as easily broken down here. You might think that you have to look away from the road a few more seconds just to see what speed you're going, but actually it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. When I've tried, it's a matter of a couple of centimeters, and your eyes will do that just as quickly as they would if it was higher up on the frame. So this is definitely a better place to place the display, but it does require a longer cable. You can get replacement cables. They're called Duet, not Juliet, but Duet 4-pin male to female extension cables. Basically, Duet is the standard used for the whole electric e-bike display setup and all the controls and so on. For the pedal assist remote control to the display, it's the 4-pin version. It's always colored blue, apparently. Instead of getting an extension cable, which would make the cable too long, I simply decided to make my own cable. I got an extension cable and spliced it to the other cable. It's not a very complicated operation if you have just some basic electrical skills, so definitely worth doing. Otherwise, you can get extension cables that will do the job for you. Okay, well, that's about it. That's the end of the video on the handlebars upgrade, BMX handlebars upgrade to the Mate X, and why it's important to consider doing this at the same time as the front fork. I hope you can use this. Have a nice day. See you next time.